I feel like there's a gap between what the consumer says they're concerned with and what they actually do about it.
Can I simplify that and say you're literally taking all the mom and pop stores and convenience stores around the country and then giving them the power of Amazon? Why don't you collect all your purchase history and why don't you collect all the stuff that you've done and try and sell it in the open market and see how much you get for it? Their data on its own has no value. It's the refining and the processing in the back end.
I would say the audience is very unique in that it is an immediate consumption customer. I would bet on the retailers and especially the retailers that have a high shopping frequency.
TikTok Shop will create a big splash in the market and will challenge Amazon in the US.
John Reiss is a 25-year-old veteran of digital media, behavioral data, and most recently, retail media. His career spans numerous ventures across ad tech, martech ecosystem, including TripAdvisor, Comscore, and now Axonet, where they're building the first national C-store retail media network that aggregates transaction and loyalty data across independent storefronts to provide CPG marketers with addressable, shoppable audiences. I'm delighted to have John Reiss on our show. Watch the full podcast on YouTube.
Welcome to the Lost Party Cookie, the podcast where we discuss the future of digital advertising, big tech, and marketing for those in tech but are not techies. I'm your host, Sandeep Ramesh, ad sales leader, marketer, and investor.
All right, welcome, John, to the Lost Party Cookie podcast. Why are we called that? Well, it's referencing the confusion that consumers have when they are thrown these jargons from the ad tech industry about first party and third party. So they're all lost about what privacy really means. John, given that you've started speaking about why it's called Lost Party Cookie, what do you think consumers think about privacy? Like, what do you think about uh, the gap between what consumers think about privacy versus what the industry feels that they should care about?
I feel like there's a gap between what the consumer says they're concerned with and what they actually do about it. I think most consumers are worried that some big corporations will utilize their information in a way to generate millions and millions of dollars and take advantage of them. Yet, consumers do very little from that point on. They do reap the benefits of sharing their data through improved advertising and relevance and others. The sentiment is there, but the action is not.
Cool. I just wanted to get that out of the way because people are always wondering why are you called the Lost Party Cookie? But um, what I want you to do is we've given you a grand welcome and introduction, but I'd love for viewers to hear from you in like 3 or 4 lines about what you currently do.
I am the vice president of business development at a startup called Axonet. Axonet is a C store or convenience store data and media gateway, which translates to we are building a retail media network to serve the convenience and energy space.
Can I simplify that and say you're literally taking all the mom and pop stores and convenience stores around the country and then giving them the power of Amazon?
That would be a fair summary, yes. And for the record, there's roughly 150,000 convenience stores in the US alone.
That's significant. That's significant. They do need all the power that they can get. All right. I always start this podcast with a little bit of a rewind, and I'd love to rewind back to your childhood. I know we've spoken before, and I know that your dad was also in the advertising industry. But I'd love to know, be a fly on the wall when John was a little kid, and what kind of things influenced you, or when any incidents or anecdotes from your childhood that you thought sort of shaped your career going forward.
You mentioned my father, and I will lean on that because he was what you would call a madman or madmen. Um, he was, yeah, absolutely. So he was a Manhattan advertising guy, and I was enamored as a child by the way he presented himself in a suit and went to work every day. He traveled all over the world. He seemed to have a lifestyle that I was interested in. And outside of the lifestyle, it was uh, he's probably the most honest person I've ever met. And oftentimes, when you think about sales and honesty, they may not jive well, but he was very successful and very honest. I will say that I was not the only child impacted by his career choice. There were four children, me being one of them. Three of us went into media agencies advertising. And yeah, so we kind of followed in those footsteps.
You have like a big gang of folks who you can sort of all help out each other in the media space. That's a big advantage to have, like a family that works in the same industry.
We do. We share passions and we share language, so that helps.
And going a little bit further on to your first sort of your jobs and your career, etc. Was there anything? Can you remember early on in your career anything that impacted you that you thought shaped your future decisions and where you are right now?
I would likely say at one point in my career, I pivoted from media sales alone, basically selling audiences and the media to engage them and the optimization that follows to hit key KPI objectives for the marketer. Um, Programmatic and algorithms and machines were starting to make more and more decisions. And I saw it as a threat to my role because I was helping clients optimize. And when these machines started taking over, I realized at that point that data is really where the value is. So I made a career move to the data side, specifically online behavior data that went web wide, so you can understand how people are engaging other websites and domains and apps. And uh, that was a very big learning curve for me because I went from a media language to a data language. And anybody that's jumped into a data lake, it's really hard to know where to start. And um, I learned through that experience that the starting point is with the questions you ask. You really need to understand the questions. And normally it's not the stated question. You have to dig deeper and really understand what the true questions are. Uh, so that forced me to kind of learn a consultative approach at how do you get to the questions that are really being asked or the questions that really need to be asked. Because once you understand the question, now you can go out and you can chase down the sources or the specific data that will help you get the answers. Moving from media to data aligned me well for a later transition into retail media, which is really combining those two worlds.
We're going to speak a lot about retail media. Just before I sink our teeth into the meat of retail media, I just wanted to. There are lots of young viewers watching this show. What is the one piece of unconventional advice that you would have for someone just starting out in their career?
I'm going to say that if you get advice that challenges you at the core, don't take it. I'll give you an example. I was told that I have a tendency to overshare and overgive. And I took that advice, and as uncomfortable as I was, where I felt I needed to hold back what I was naturally inclined to do or to give or to say, um, it was uncomfortable, but I did it. And I did it over a period of time, and I found that the folks that I was meeting with were not leaning into me as much as they used to. They were not, I wasn't getting the depth of response to my questions that I normally would get. And I ended up backpedaling and going back to what was natural to me, to the oversharing ways, and found that I got back similar to what I gave. And if you want to get more, give more. So the unconventional advice would be, if somebody gives you advice that goes against who you are, don't take it.
That is pretty, yeah, that is pretty thoughtful in the sense that if someone challenges your very identity, then yeah, it's probably not a good idea to take that and kind of change yourself. All right, as promised, let's get deeper into the meat of retail media, for example. Um, and the reason we want to get into retail media is because the pod is all about talking about the future of digital advertising. And if you look at all the projections on digital advertising for the next 5 years or even 10 years, there is a humongous shift to retail media. And I'm talking about a total retail media is projected to be about $100 billion in revenue for, for everyone put together by 2027, 2028. That is a humongous shift from where it is today. It's probably about 25 to 30 billion or 35, 40, give or take. Um, so my question to you is that, do you see, what are the headwinds and tailwinds you think that can sort of crash this party or take it even beyond? Like, let's say 100 billion, what can make this 50 or 60 billion, and what can make it 120, 130 billion? What are the upsides and downsides?
The upside is going to be steeped in standardization of measurement and attribution. Because today, when you look at where the lion's share of that revenue is spent, it's in the big players, Amazon, Walmart, Target, etc. Because they have the rich data on their shoppers, and they've got the volume or the scale there. In order for the growth to continue and expand outside of and beyond the big key players, keep in mind, Amazon's got roughly 77% of the retail media dollars today. In order for those dollars to move into other retailer environments, it's going to be contingent on the measurement and attribution standards that will roll out into what will ultimately become a long tail of retail media. And anybody who's familiar with long tails, oftentimes the long tail will be bigger than the top players.
But then, if I put myself in the shoes of the advertisers, they have these. They have a very complex situation to manage on its own, in the sense that, as things stand, the CPG advertiser, for example, is already looking at a shopper marketing team, a category team, a media team, a brand team, a search team, social team. They probably have someone who's focused on, let's say, Amazon, or is focused on some of the other marketplaces. If you were to give them advice on how to prioritize their resources, what would you tell them? Because they're like, there's proliferation of retail media networks is kind of unsustainable for us to handle.
I would say go to where the data is rich and the audience is large, and work your way down. There will be certain industry verticals will be aggregated. And I'm speaking to the convenience store space. I'm wearing my Axonet hat. I've got my Axonet logo shirt on. There will be players that aggregate. And the reason being is that certain verticals do not have a large enough individual player to have the data depth and audience scale that's necessary. So when you aggregate, that is where you create that rich, scaled data from a shopper perspective and the audience as well to really matter to the CPGs, to the advertisers, and to the marketers. It's one of those classic scenarios of alone you go fast, together you go far. And aggregation will occur in a number of different verticals.
A majority of the revenue from retail media network is coming from sponsored products or search. Some of them from display, but mostly from search. Now, would you call this cost of doing business, or would you call this additional media spend? Because that's a big distinction that will determine where this money is going to come from. If it's a cost of doing business, you could probably raise prices. You could try and figure out how you can reduce costs in your operations, and you figure out, well, this is the cost of doing business on retail media networks, and this is what I have to do. Then it doesn't impact other media. But if this is looked upon as a media channel where you invest to build brand, etc., then you're starting to look at this impacting television and other digital mediums, etc. So where do you think this falls under retail media as a cost?
I'm going to say both. I think the cost of business rationale is really driven by consumers and consumer behavior. It's very clear that consumers are engaged in digital more now than they ever have. So they're shopping more online. They're utilizing their mobile phone for in-store shopping experiences and research. So the sponsored products and retail media, how they play, it's a cost of business because you have to be where your consumers are. So that's why I say cost of business. Where we talk about incremental is where the dollars can be pulled from other sources into retail media. I think we see broadcast TV spend is coming down. Where are those dollars going? They're going into other channels. And these other channels are determined based on efficiency. And it's very clear that retail media is more efficient than broadcast. And the ability to provide closed loop attribution is key, especially when we're in economic conditions that we're navigating today, where companies are scaling back. Debt is more expensive than it's been in recent years. The CFO is involved in more decisions at smaller dollar amounts than they have been, and the ability to one-to-one deterministically say that these number of dollars were spent and returned this many is key. It's critical. So I think that's why my answer to the question is both.
All right, so let's go. I'm taking your answer about it being both, and then focusing on the media aspect of it, and say that in the future, the ideal scenario for an advertiser is that they have access to retail media audiences, which means that they know whether John purchased, a bottle of shampoo in the last 18 months and which brand it was. And when I mean John, I mean anonymized, but just not an individual. But let's say they know somebody who's purchased a particular brand of shampoo in the last 18 months, and they want to reach that person while they are watching Hulu, just for example, and now you do have the ability theoretically to join those dots, and you can actually target folks on different platforms when everybody comes together and shares data, clean rooms, etc. Do you see this as a big trend going forward? Where do you see the stumbling blocks for this scenario to play out?
I do see that playing out. It really all derives from the first party data afforded by the retailer. And looking at their purchase history, purchase frequency, durations, timestamps, recency. I mean, what you can do with that data, even thinking about utilizing predictive technologies or capabilities to anticipate the shopper's needs that they haven't even anticipated yet, is very powerful from the consumer perspective. As far as stumbling blocks in that journey, privacy laws have become more and more stringent. Perhaps they will become even more stringent. We don't know. There are ideas of consumer groups needing to give permissions to utilize their data, and perhaps even pooling so that consumers get paid money based on their data usage. I think that when we get into those aspects, those are the stumbling blocks that we can encounter. Privacy and controls over data, and then even compensation back to the consumer if it does take that path. Those are
That's exactly why the podcast is named what it is, because if you tell a consumer today that, hey, if you buy something on Amazon, for example, or any retailer, um, they could potentially take that data anonymized, put it in a clean room, and then some advertiser could be able to reach you when you're watching your television on your CTV. Now, this is perfectly quote unquote privacy safe because it's first party data and it's going to a clean room. According to the industry, this is kosher. This is appropriate and a good use of data for everyone's benefit. But when you tell a consumer this, I don't know how they would react. I don't even know if they think that this is a breach of privacy or not, because there is so much confusion, or there is just lack of understanding on what privacy even means. Most consumers actually feel privacy means that when they get an ad that feels creepy, they just feel like it's a lack of privacy. There's no other understanding. Do you feel like when you speak to your family members or anybody else as a consumer, and the consumer hat is very different from the industry hat?
Like I said earlier, I think consumers, if you bring the topic up, they'll say, hey, Amazon's making a lot of money off of me. I want some of that money. How do I get some of that? If they're going to use my data, give me some of that money. But at the end of the day, that money is coming back to you. Maybe not in a proportion that you'd like, but I'm thinking about Walmart and what their CFO said a couple quarters ago, which is all of the high margin revenue that they're pulling out of their retail media platform. A good portion of that is going into the business to keep their costs, their product cost down. Because they know that if their costs are lower than their competitors, the shoppers are going to go there. So at the end of the day, Walmart is making money through retail media, but they're saving the consumer money by the margin pressure that they're getting on their product sales is made up for in the retail. So the consumers are not having to pay a higher cost, or as high a cost as inflation recently demanded.
That's a good point. It's a deflationary. I mean, if retailers are making more money from other sources, I mean, they have to give it back invariably through pricing. So, there's this interesting quote that I read, and I really appreciate. Might help consumers gain perspective or reality check, is that if you think your data is so valuable, why don't you collect all your purchase history, and why don't you collect all the stuff that you've done and try and sell it in the open market and see how much you get for it? Their data on its own has no value. It's the refining and the processing in the back end at a scale of millions and billions that makes that data make sense to somebody else. So on its own,
I think what you're saying is supporting the need to
yeah.
aggregate data. at the consumer level and at the retailer level across
Yeah,
the
at an
board.
individualized level, it's literally useless to most people. Okay, I want to talk. You can put on your Axonet hat right now because I want to talk a little more about the business and the solutions that you guys offer. So you are aggregating convenience stores across the country. If I'm an advertiser, my first question, forgive me if I'm coming across as brutally frank, my first question is that why should I care? Because is this audience unique? And second, is this audience valuable enough for me to invest in this channel, for example, as compared to all the other priorities I might have?
Sure. Uh, I would say the audience is very unique in that it is an immediate consumption customer. Uh, Rarely does somebody go into a convenience store with a shopping list that they're anticipating purchasing products that they won't consume or utilize for 5 to 10 days. Much of what is being purchased is going to be consumed same day, perhaps even sooner than that. So it is an immediate consumption. And when you look at the power of media to influence in an environment of immediate consumption, there's a lot of impulse happening. It's not a long consideration cycle for the consumer. So the power or the ability for media to influence an action is very, very high in this segment of retail environments. Now, there are certain products that are available in convenience stores and certain products that lean heavily into convenience stores. If I sell diapers, probably not going to really want to invest too much into the convenience store channel because the percent of sales is so low. I'm not going to invest there. But if you are tobacco, alcohol, cold beverages, snacks, candies, where a large chunk of their sales is running through the convenience store, then yes, I would say it matters significantly to
So
their
I really
business.
understand this particular element of the convenience store is where the impulse is the highest. Fair enough. But then that's in store. Are you saying that the impulse is high even when they are ordering online through through the e-commerce versions of these convenience stores? Are you referring specifically to the impulse in store?
The impulse in store specifically, and that's where the vast majority of the media dollars are going to be spent. Uh, Today, e-commerce in the convenience store space is very low. Compared to grocery, where I believe it is somewhere between 18 and 20% of sales is happening online. That is not true in the convenience store space. There are food services that are available in convenience stores, so they're seeing online engagement and ordering there. Not a lot of purchasing of candy bars and fountain sodas or anything like that online. Loyalty is where, or loyalty programs is where we see a lot of investment on the convenience store retailer front. And those loyalty incentives are not just pennies saved through the fuel that they're putting into their vehicles or the charging stations for EV, where it's at saving pennies at the fuel pump, saving time or saving money in the store, discovering new products in the store. Something that's unique to the convenience store, too, is a lot of CPG manufacturers will launch a new product and utilize the convenience store space as a test environment to see how does it sell before they negotiate and move into the grocery channel. So it's really good for product launches and to solicit kind of feedback from consumers.
What is the equivalent of a sponsored product ad in store? But that's an offline media, right? I mean, how's that digital media? Is there digital media in store?
Well, the way we look at it in Axonet is really two ways. there is one-to-many advertising, and then there is one-to-one. Now, the addressable audiences available through the loyalty programs are where the shopper experience can be truly enhanced on a one-to-one level based on past purchase history and propensity and likelihood to appreciate another product, etc. And that is the holy grail. That is what we want to offer all convenience store shoppers. When I go to my pump and I'm saving my 10 cents per gallon, I've logged into my app. I've told the store that I'm here at this pump. Thank you for saving me 10 cents. Hit me with an offer, whether it be on the screen at the pump, whether it be on my mobile device in my loyalty app. Give me a reason to go into the store and engage. That's the one-to-one. The one-to-many is where we go when we don't have a loyalty member that's addressable. Now, that could be audio at the pump. It could be audio in the store. It could be digital signage. And many of those campaigns can be run based on time of day. They can be, run based on the neighborhood demographics. More of it falls more aligned with the broadcast approach. That's what I would call one-to-many. But the real gold is in the one-to-one, the addressable audiences through loyalty programs.
Cool. Let's sort of take a step back, and I wanted your thoughts on the entire retail media ecosystem. So if I look at the with how the landscape is panning out, you have marketplaces like Amazon, Instacart, which are doing pretty well in retail media. You have the retailers themselves, the Walmarts and the Krogers and the Alberts of the world, who have started their own retail media network offerings, etc. And they have the advantage of having loyalty cards and closed loop measurement that comes along with it. And now you have a new bunch of commerce media, which is the likes of Uber and DoorDash and Lyft or whoever else it is, who also are using their commercial transactions with consumers, because that also is an opportunity to display media. So, I mean, these are the three segments I could think of. But in general, when you look at the next 10 years, do you see who the winners and losers from this set of retailers or this set of retail media is likely to be?
Between the marketplaces and the retailers themselves?
Well, marketplaces, retailers. Well, you can add convenience stores now, but or these commerce media platforms. I don't know if I'm missing out on. I'm sure I'm missing out on some segment of retail media networks, but I'm talking broadly about these three or four.
Sure. Yeah, I think that the most valuable aspect of retail media is the relationship that the consumer has with whatever the environment is that they're engaging, whether it be a marketplace, a retailer, or a commerce environment. It is the job of those experience hosts to understand their shoppers better than anybody else. And they need to have a keen focus on the consumer and the benefits to the consumer. If the motivation is to make money and the consumer takes a hit in order to do that, it's going to fail. It's got to be consumer first. Would be my piece of advice. And any and all decisions must benefit the consumer.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have a choice between Amazon's, Instacarts of the world, and the Krogers and the Walmarts of the world, and the Ubers and the DoorDashes of the world? Like, if you're a betting man, which horse would you bet on?
I would bet on the retailers, and especially the retailers that have a high shopping frequency. When you look at grocery, high frequency. When you look at like car purchasing and sales environments, significantly lower frequency. I think retailers with high frequency are not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, they probably need to get their technology, because when I look at the today Amazon, for every dollar or every $10 that it sells as a retailer, is they have $1 in advertising revenue. So that's 10% of their overall revenue is in advertising revenue, whereas it's about 3 or 4% at best for the other retailers.
Yeah, and I would say look further. Don't just look at revenue. Look at margin, and you'll see that I believe the stat that I recently came across was 50%, roughly 50% of Amazon's profit is coming from the.
Yeah, and the rest is coming from the AWS. So essentially, they're running a retail business for charity, or not as charity, but as a customer acquisition,
Yeah,
as a
exactly.
customer acquisition channel.
Well, and that goes, yeah, and that goes back to your idea of, is it a cost?
Fair enough.
Uh,
Fair enough. Great. Amazing. So I want to now move to a more fun and probably a last segment, which is the true or false. And it's essentially called the crystal ball. And we're going to ask you a bunch of 10 statements uh, as quickly as possible. And you just need to answer true or false. I mean,
oh
if you have
boy,
an
oh boy,
explanation, go ahead. But otherwise, we can just stay with true or false. I'm going to ask you. Um, okay. 5 years down the line, Amazon continues to be greater than 70% share of retail media. True or false?
false, because there are retail media enablement platforms available today that will allow retailers to get into the space with relatively low investment and try it out. And if they adopt the right principles, they will see success. And I don't think the advertising pie is getting bigger. I think it's shifting. And some of those dollars will shift from Amazon to other environments.
Google and Facebook will move below 40% market share this decade.
I don't believe that will happen. Um, so false, yes. Um, yeah, I'll say false.
Bezos will make a comeback.
False. I think he's focused on philanthropic endeavors and trying to change the world as best he.
I'd say he's focused on enjoying his life as much as he can on his yacht. But fair enough.
He's probably got more than one yacht.
The US will see a new president in 2025. Okay.
Yes, true.
TikTok Shop will create a big splash in the market and will challenge Amazon in the US.
Oh, you put me on the spot there. I'm going to say false. And the reason being, we have seen Amazon, Google, and a handful of others try to get into the shopping experience, and it hasn't gone so well. Perhaps TikTok's got some amazing stuff that others haven't tried, but based on others that have walked the path before them, it will be challenging. So I'll stay with false.
This is an interesting question I ask a lot of people. Amazon's number 3 today. By the end of this decade, will they overtake Facebook to be the number 2 advertising platform in the US?
Yes.
That's a big statement. All right.
And I'll say it because of the relationship they have with their shoppers and the frequency of those shopping events.
Got it.
So yes,
We will see fully automated retail stores everywhere in the next 5 years.
no. People like people for the most part. People trust people. Competence is demonstrated through people. Trust, likability, competence. That is the beauty of people, and I don't see those aspects changing via machines and
Amazing. I had
automation.
some other questions, but I'd hate to I'd hate to change the topic and not leave it at that really nice conclusion. So thank you so much, John. it was great. So I really understood a lot more about the business of Axonet, of course, but also about your thoughts on retail media. And I think our viewers of the podcast will appreciate everything that you sort of told us as well. So thanks a ton for making the time on the podcast.
Well, yeah, I'd like to say thank you as well. I'm very flattered by your interest in my thoughts, my background, my experience, and kind of part of what makes me me. So thank you for your interest, and I hope your audience gets some value out of me and what.
Hold on.